danger, Dr. Danfield. Our story opens in the small town of Benton, located north of New York City on the Hudson River. Two French-Canadian laborers are digging a ditch on the grounds of a prosperous-looking farm.
Mon Dieu. Mon Dieu. Pierre! Hey, Pierre!
Oui? What is it, mon ami?
Come here. There's something I do not understand.
Hey, what is the matter, Jacques? You find some gold, maybe? Mother of Mary.
I think perhaps we have found something we are not supposed to, huh, Pierre?
Oh, cross yourself, Jacques. It is the body of a man. Sac. What is left of a man. Come, we should not disturb the grave of the dead.
Grave, you say? Do not be a fool, Pierre. Does one bury one's dead in a field behind the house with neither casket nor cross to mark the spot, huh? That I do not think.
No? Then what is it?
Before I make my offer, there's one other thing you must know.
Oh, what's that?
Well, between June 6th and June 13th, neighbors reported seeing a light in the Holbrook home. And some of the reports stated that a mysterious figure was seen moving about the grounds.
And what's your answer?